Hello.
Hi, Robert.
Hi. Hi.
Great to see you.
Nice to see you too. How are you today?
Oh,
Good, good. How are you?
how are you?
Good, good. It looks like it's sunny there.
Yeah. It's
Same
such a,
here. It's up to like I don't know 23 degrees or something. Almost it's going to get close to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, so
Well, that's
wow, that's hot.
yeah.
yeah.
I think up to about 20 degrees today here in
Okay.
Hampshire.
All right.
So,
Welcome
Oh,
to our
oh yes,
second interview from our trilogy of interview. But if we're
yes.
counting all interviews, it's I think it's ninth one.
Yes.
Mm.
Yes. So,
We are very happy to be here today with our dear teacher, colleague, and friend Robert Dilts. Robert,
mm.
thank you very much for agreeing to do these interviews with us.
It is more than pleasure for me. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to have fun and enjoy myself and enjoy you and the questions that I'm sure will be very intriguing and interesting.
it has turned out to be surprisingly lively and interesting, and really
Yeah.
exciting. I don't know why. So, Oksana, the architect here. What do you have in mind today?
So we started last interview with the idea of Robert's life path and the place of pyramidological levels on this path. And Robert a little bit explained from the author's mouth the idea of it. And then
Better than
Richard
the horses. Right?
And
Mhm.
then Richard asked the question how your contributions, what you developed, and because you're such a modest person, we thought it's kind of a little bit was what's the word?
Uncomfortable, maybe.
Yeah, to like kind of say, but that's who you are for us and your life path,
And not
and
only for us.
yeah, and for us, it's for all your students and people who've been reading your books. This is like your life path itself. It's an example for coaches, trainers, psychologists, people of helping professions
All heroes on their journey.
how
Yes.
to not only teach but also how to maintain your life, different spheres of your life, and build the knowledge and skills you're bringing other people, also using for yourself. So.
Mm.
And we've been just not finished the first module of Slide of Mouse 3. And
Yes.
it was incredible, interesting weekend.
It was I think it was a little different than Slide of Moth 3 last time. I think
Yes. Yeah.
something more cohesive or more I don't know what's the word. Something like that.
Holistic.
Well, yeah, but that sounds a little strange. I mean, it was like I kind of deeper and a more complete picture, I think, of what you
Yeah.
were talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, that is a natural thing that typically happens when, you do something for the first time and then you do it again and you're kind of tightening up um, the different parts of it and sort of learning from, okay, what what could I improve from the one that we did before? So I think it's a natural sort of a development cycle. And then, finally things take a particular shape that then is only going to vary, incrementally. But yeah, that was I liked I liked the way that it was unfolding and I'm really looking forward to the next one.
Yes, the path.
Yes. Mm.
The, it was remarkable to me, and it seemed to be very effective that you just kept going over and over and over again 5, 6 times until finally it was again giving people a chance in small chunks to really absorb it to
Yeah.
really get it just seemed very effective because especially for people who don't have a deep background or a lot of experience, it's pretty complicated. There's a lot of different things to keep track of. So
Yeah.
going over and
Yeah, I mean, and not only that, I think probably even it's true that even though this was an English language program, the majority of people or I don't know, at least are not maybe the majority, but a number of the people are not native English speaking. So you're doing these language patterns that are not even in your own language, and so I think this idea
at 4 a.m. in the morning.
yeah, right. Some people 4 a.m. in the morning. I think this idea of getting the repetition of getting the mindset and with different kinds of contents, because then you actually are getting to the deeper structure. You go, okay, now the pattern is there. So
Right.
yeah.
The thing I got most from it, and I'm kind of always a beginner. Uh,
Mm.
I got the idea that that just a naked belief, if I can call it that, without any support belief, without any basis, without any
Yeah.
foundation, is really just pie in the sky, or just it's
Yeah.
ephemeral and not sustainable. So
I
that was for
yes.
me big,
Yeah.
big learning.
Yeah, I think that is a really important thing to realize that, but like kind of like we were saying in the program, beliefs themselves are not just like some program. They're derived from other things, they're connected to other things, that they're part of a system. And especially beliefs that are strong, whether it's an empowering belief or a limiting belief, if it's strong and it's resisting, change. It's because it's fitting in somewhere. It's not just that those words are not, there's nothing special particularly about those words. It's how they are interconnected with other things. And I think that's one of the deep lessons that I got from Gregory Bateson. That notion that everything is interconnected with everything else, and that remember he said that the limiting condition to the time it takes for something to change, how long it takes to change, is how long it takes for all of the different parts of the system to get informed, which is
Absolutely.
usually not going to be immediately. And that's why I also think some of that repetition can be important. It's not really just doing the same thing over. It's more like iteration. Uh,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
in systems theory, especially self-organization theory, there's a really key thing that's called iteration. And iteration means, okay, I have a process, you put something through it, and then you take what comes out and you put it back in again, and then you put it back in again. And so it's actually, it's how do I say, it's shifting, it's enriching each time. It's like the way that something like a fractal is created. It's the same pattern, but it's
Mhm.
repeated in a way that is in relationship to its previous output. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's like you can't go into the same river twice. Once you've gone
right.
through the process, it's changed. So
Yeah,
you run it through again. It's not really repeating it, the process perhaps, but it's different because there's been a change.
yeah, yeah. And again, I think these ideas of realizing that beliefs themselves, and I think this was one of the other key things that was coming out of that, some of the, especially some of the demos that we were doing, are that just like I was kind of using this analogy that just like we talk about in NLP as a driver submodality, meaning, right, so you have a representation,
Sure, sure.
it has these
Mhm.
different qualities, color, size, and oftentimes, you can change one and it doesn't necessarily change the others. But then the one that's the driver is I shift that one and everything
Exactly.
sort of self-organizes around it. And I think that's the same thing with beliefs. You get sort of this pivotal belief, and everything else begins to either reorganize or, loosen. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we've definitely seen this and used it for
Mm.
decades in some modalities, but I never thought about it in terms of beliefs. How
Mhm.
then I guess it's trial and error, right? Just sort of like with finding the leading or the
Well,
guidance and
well,
modality.
yes and no. I mean, I think this is where what one of the patterns I think was starting to come out even in the practices and the demos there. Um, things, there's probably these core, what you might call more core beliefs, more identity related beliefs. And if you get those, I mean, that's the teaching of the levels, right? That
Exactly.
shift something at an identity level, and all of the others are going to naturally have to they're going to be impacted in some way. So I think, I'm often looking and listening for what's that sort of identity belief that is going to be the one that if you can get it, that makes the others, shift more easily. Now, sometimes, as we also saw in one of the demos, you sort of chunk down to something that's you make a little shift in a behavior or in the environment, and that also it trickles up as well, or it starts to create something that's more, that's going to build. So yeah, it's an interesting. It's I don't know, an interesting question, and to say how do you know which one it's going to be? And I think it's more than just trial and error. I think you begin to get a sense for certain kinds of beliefs, and I know that I will sometimes intuitively sort of keep asking a question, or pushing a little bit more to see, okay, I feel that there's something else here that needs to be brought out, and that's going to be the key, whatever the change point, the flash point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's never, if you have experience and therefore intuition, it's never just random trial and error. I would, for example, if I were gonna guess you're leading some modality or something, I would say probably something visual because of your body type and because of your vocabulary and so on. So I wouldn't just start kinesthetic maybe, because I would think that might be the least likely. When the
Right.
beliefs assume that the same kind of intuition would do. But what you said was really important there is that the beliefs that are related to identity are
Yeah.
probably going to be the ones that are going to shift the load if because although they're at the top of the pyramid, they're really the foundation, aren't they?
Yes.
For everything that's built on them.
Yes. Yeah. And again, if you start thinking of, most beliefs, it starts with something like, I believe da 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 da. Well, who's the I that's believing? And that I, you shift that I, and then
Exactly.
yeah, the rest is going to be, or you question that I, which I, or um, how does this I believe that? And then that becomes very interesting questions. Yeah.
Who is I? Who is asking?
Yeah, right, exactly. So, we used to say that, in the English language, at least, I, it's a one letter word is the biggest nominalization in the language.
Yeah.
A very small word that has a very big implication.
It's very interesting, this idea we came to the observer is influencing on system,
Mm,
because this quantum principle right now
right.
it's like everywhere, and like
Mhm.
people are speaking about that, and what we see especially in psychology, coaching, let's say those professions who help others to cope with the reality, this kind
Yes.
of professions which are coming to your workshops to study with us.
Mm,
So people who want help other people, this is the key principle, because right now there are so many different approaches, different schools, different directions, and it's profoundly influencing what person who needs help will get from this particular person, coach or
yes.
consultant, because it's everything and depends from the approach. If you ask the same question, what is the problem? If you
Yes.
ask psychoanalysis specialist, that it will be one answer. Family therapy will get you other answer. NLP will get you other. So, and my question would be, your perception of reality. I mean, your personal Robert
Mhm.
Dilts when he's not on the stage.
Mhm.
It's it's probably so rich and flexible, because I've been looking how you work with people, I
Mm.
mean, during exercises, and there are some tough stuff. People are
Yes.
touching traumatic places sometimes and so on. Or you kind of see this person has different map, I mean, the point of view, but you kind of manage not only not to, negate what person's reality is, but also not implement your own reality, which is really a rare
Mm.
case. So you
Mm.
kind of act
Mm.
without like what we see, even without filter. Of course, with filter. Of course, your observer who
Yeah.
influence. So, what is your perception would be?
Oh, I think that's a wonderful question, Oksana. Yeah, and I think first of all, if I go back to the very beginning, the very definition of what NLP is, it's the study of the structure of subjective experience. And I think that is often key. And I think to really get that, to get that deeply, that, you know, all of these different, all of these different approaches, like you were naming, they're all different ways of filtering subjective experience. But subjective experience is subjective to that person, So for me, what's interesting is not so much the, again, the content, it's the looking at the deeper structure. So for example, let's say I'm working with somebody and they go into a past life. It really doesn't matter if I believe in past life or not. That's their experience. And it's not, I mean, and the thing that we would say in NLP that's most important is not so much the content of it, but the structure of it and how that is impacting the person. So, and that's the whole notion of beliefs. So somebody goes into a past life, or somebody has some kind of, they have a particular spiritual orientation. The question is, well, how is that impacting you in your life in the present? The map is not the territory. And I myself, I have many maps, that I don't think anyone is more right or wrong than the others. I can look at something from I've written books, Tools of the Spirit. Have studied physics. I can look at it as an artist. I can look at it from an NLP perspective and um, an Ericksonian perspective. So I think the key is that realization that all of these are, they are filters that are going to show us particular, unveils, particular aspects of what's going on. I was thinking when you were talking, my wife Deborah and I have been sort of discussing. We have this kind of little pet project of trying to define what is the deep structure of transformational change, right? Because she works with five rhythms and dance, and she works with mindfulness, and she works with,
Mhm.
kinds of meditation, and she knows NLP. But I have these, we know these other different processes. I mean, there's people like Joe Dispenza, there's all kinds of processes. And it kind of goes back to, I remember the thing that really attracted me about NLP from the very first book that Bandler and Grinder wrote, The Structure of Magic. They made this interesting point. They said, look, all methods, work for some people, right? Shamanic methods work for some people. These other kind of psychoanalysis works for some people. So they said, rather than argue about the method, why don't we look at what happens inside the person when it works? And that was always my initial definition of NLP. It was, and NLP is whatever works. So if it works, that's NLP. Then the only question is, what is the structure of that? And what
Mhm.
Bandler and Grinder said from that very first book was, well, the first very obvious thing is that no matter what methodology is used, the map of that person has become enriched in some way. Suddenly, more choices are available,
Mhm.
and kind of this idea that you know, and I think this is also part of the way I look at things. They were pointing out you never want to take away a choice, right? You want to add choices, and sort of this idea that if it's truly a better choice, the person will take it. Now, again, it has to be a choice, meaning it can't just be an option or a possibility. It has to be something that person feels that they have some ability to do, but also it has to truly be better for the whole system. And again, a lot of times what happens with certain symptoms is that we try to change them thinking that there's something, a problem with them, but they are serving some kind of positive purpose or positive intention. So I think, Oksana, coming back to your question, when I'm working with somebody, I have sort of a deep structure process, a pattern, and the contents that are coming out, I'm always sensing, is this something that's taking us in a direction of, more richness, more possibilities, more choices, or is it kind of going into, shutting down, more limitation? Yeah. And then I'm kind of following, well, what would be the way to help to just, open things more? So I don't know, that's a first response, and I'm sure there's much more.
Very interesting.
I hate, I mean, I'm really kind of, I know I'm treading on thin ice, but it just occurred to me that this whole idea of choice is antithetical to fascism.
Yes,
And so, maybe, like Woody Guthrie's guitar, we could say that,
Of course.
these ideas, this format kills fascism or something.
right.
That's a provocative, but it's an antidote, perhaps would be more
Yeah,
pleasant way to
I think
say
I like that idea. I think antidote is true. You could also say um, that there's various forms of fundamentalism, which again, in and of
it.
themselves,
Right.
is
That's the broader
you
category.
know, but but um, it's all again. I think the challenge is what makes fascism a problem. And I actually wrote about this in my I have this paper that I wrote, like a monograph on the Law of Requisite Variety, which is, the William Ross Ashby's idea that a successful system has the amount of variety, requisite variety, the variability to match the amount of change and possible scenarios that are in its environment. So the thing is, if I only have one way to do something and that way gets blocked, I'm stuck. If I have five ways, I have plan B, plan C, and I can switch. And this was sort of the whole idea of being able to be flexible. And I do think that this is also important when I'm coaching somebody. I mean, it sounds like an abstract rule, but it's very pragmatically meaningful. Like you were saying, Oksana, somebody comes up, they have a very different map of situation than me, or they hit into some very difficult point. What's important for me is being able to then say, all right, I need to um, expand my number of choices, expand the number, the type of words that I might be able to use, my vocabulary, my nonverbal communication. It's often a great opportunity to learn and to expand in some way. In the old days, Panther and Grinda used to say, there's no, there's what was the term? There's no un maybe this is not the right way. There's no unfixable clients. There's only inflexible, coaches. You know,
Mhm.
Meaning, okay, if I
Right.
had the flexibility, I would be able to find some way. And people like Milton Erickson demonstrate that kind of flexibility. The ability to just
Wow.
shift and follow the client wherever they're going, and then still guide them back to a place where they have, more possibilities, more choice. Or more in harmony in some way. So yeah, I think and by the way, I mean these terms we're using, fundamentalism, fascism, they creep into many different things. There are places where we have our own, we are our own inner fundamentalists. Like it's
Yes.
got to be this way, or this is the right way, and I think yeah,
Fundamentalism then is essentially a lack of choice or
Yes.
limited choice, and that's a really interesting idea
Yeah.
because it immediately suggests solutions.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, and again, interestingly, Richard, coming back to this notion of identity, you know, where sometimes people have flexibility on a behavior level, but there's a fair amount of rigidity on an identity level,
Exactly.
I could do that, but I won't do that because it doesn't fit with my perception of who I am, which then, as we said, that determines which slices of this pyramid, you're going to have access to.
Mhm.
So,
Very interesting. I can do that, but I won't because I have different, belief on this level.
yeah, and it doesn't fit with, I won't do that. I mean, we all will say things. I could do, there's a lot of things we could do that are also harmful. I won't do those things because they don't fit my values. They don't fit my sense of who I am. They don't fit with my sense of personal integrity, So there's a lot, so in other words, it's not a bad thing. It's the whole notion there is it gives us some kind of guardrails. But once again, if those become too rigid and especially start preventing us from doing things that could be helpful for ourselves and others, that's where it starts to become, a limitation.
But if it's our deepest principles, like do no harm, like contribute to the community, realize your potential, and whatever like
Yeah.
that, I don't think a lot of flexibility is really needed there. I think that
Hmm.
those are something you want to keep pretty stable. Now, I mean, the cells are changing all the time. We're always changing, and maybe evolution will modify them. But I'm pretty fierce about keeping my deepest
Yeah.
principles.
Yeah. And I mean, so I think now now that becomes an interesting question then, Richard. So does that mean that you're fundamentalist? Well, and
Yeah,
certainly, so, but I think now that becomes a really
Ask
important,
his wife.
that becomes a really important issue. And the way that we talk about the pyramid, as a pyramid, which sounds like something solid, but the way that I sometimes will draw it is that it's what's called a tree structure, meaning you have a one point that has these three things, and each of those has three possibilities. Each of those has three possibilities. And I've
Mhm.
always said, you don't need, from terms of flexibility. I might need a lot of different behaviors as I travel around the world because I'm going to many, many different environments. But those behaviors can be generated by a smaller number of capabilities. And those capabilities are, motivated and driven and chosen by an even smaller number of values and beliefs. So that's the interesting thing. In the class, we're saying, what are the 5 to 7 beliefs that if you had them would change your life? You don't need 1,000 of them.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so, and now the
yeah.
big question then is, and this is where we work with these principles of sleight of mouth, is as you look at those principles that you were speaking of, Richard, um, and I, because I was listening to you as you state them, this is this notion of the red flags. None of the things that you stated fit the quote red flags that we talk about, meaning they weren't problem oriented, away from, there was no
Mhm.
negative identity judgment in your principle. There was no, none of it is about, creating some big division in, what we're calling, our whole on that we're part of. So actually, I think those principles are the ones that are most generative. And this is what I would say is then the key. Some
Mhm.
principles are generative, some principles are divisive. And so what we're calling the quote, the shadow side of quote fundamentalism is that it creates these divisive, limiting results, whereas these principles you were just expressing to me have all the qualities of generative principles. So you talk about service to the community and things like that. So that is, and I think that's a big part of what we want to also be getting across in the whole sleight of mouth work is as I'm listening, and the same thing, I could be listening to somebody else's, the religious belief of some other thing, and just going, what do I hear in that principle? Is it a generative principle? Is it an inclusive principle? Is it something that is going to um, honor and add choices, or is it something that is going to start eliminating, dividing, repelling, moving away from? And that's more so, and it's not, again, it's not the same as, it's not bad, good, or evil or something. It's just, that's what's going to happen is it's going to generate, it's going to either be generative or degenerative. And then you got to make the choice. But then if you have the choice, I don't know anybody who actually chooses degenerative.
Worse.
Right. As
Yeah.
long as it's really a choice. Some people do because they don't think there is any other choice. But yeah.
Can I just say one more thing?
Of
That's not.
course, how many you want?
I'm just starting to see that. I don't know. I get all the. It seems to me that another facet here is that when we have the fundamentalism that limits and demeans, it somehow blocks off access or limits access. It tries to close off any other option, so that it's just
Mhm.
there's only one true path, and everything else is supposed to be not even examined. Whereas in my path, the principles that I have finally adopted don't close off any other options. I still see them easily because I'm working with my clients all the time. I can see them, in myself as well. So it's not that I've blocked off everything except kindness, for example.
Right.
It doesn't exclude. It's simply my choice, which I don't
Yes.
know if fundamentalism is really a choice in some sense. If you're raised in that,
Yeah.
I'm just sort
Well,
of nibbling around the edges of the idea. I haven't.
yeah. Well, you know what? So I think first of all that obviously there's a relationship between fundamental and fundamentalism. Now, again, what you were talking about fundamental principles, and that's what I would call deep structures. Now, fundamentalism is actually strange because it's an oxymoron almost, because actually what's happening is that, as you say, it's as opposed to really getting to more and more fundamentals, you're stopping, right? You're limiting. You're not exploring anymore. And again, if we take this out of, let's take this out of, because you said it's thin ice, but let's just take something simple. And it's one of the examples I use in my article on the Law of Requisite Variety. Let's say I start a shoe store and I'm successful. Well, I'm going to get more types of customers. They're going to have different sizes of shoes. I'm going to need to get different sizes of shoes. Otherwise, I'm going to turn them away, right? I'm going to have to get different styles of shoes. I'm going to then, and suddenly, also as I get more customers, I'm going to have to get more service people. I mean, it's natural. If you're successful and you will get more variety, Now,
Yeah,
if I go, no, I'm just going to sell high-end women's shoes or something, then, okay, what happens there is that the rest of the system is going to absorb that variety. And this is what happens, when you get, and I mean, the problem with fascism, regardless, I mean, you could say, I mean, it can be harmful to people, of course, but it's not going to last because
to put
either,
frustrated bed.
right, yeah, because any more than a store is going to last if you're turning all the customers away, you're sending them elsewhere. And it's one of the things that happened in places like Nazi Germany. All the scientists left, came to America. I mean,
Yeah, and
so
built the atom bomb.
right. It actually is not a really long-term survival strategy. You know,
Wow.
it it's an
Yeah.
attempt. I mean, I think it's a misguided attempt at identity. But like you were saying, okay, here's all these possibilities, but I'm going to choose to put my focus here. That makes sense. But if starts to, again, have these red flags of then I'm starting to exclude, I'm starting to negatively judge, I'm starting to, create divisiveness, that's where it becomes a problem. So again, we need for a healthy identity, we can't do everything. You can't be all things to all people. Uh, but we can have a healthy amount of variety. And again, you stated some really important sort of fundamental principles that if you have those, they're going to help you to, develop and this is the idea of requisite variety, the minimum amount I need or the healthy amount I need to be able to deal with what's coming my way. So.
Yeah, when you were talking about your shoe store, for some reason, I was just thinking of Procrustes and how his bed would fit all the customers.
Yeah. Oh,
Robert, when you first time met Gregory Bateson, what
yes.
kind of impression you had? I mean, how do you remember your first meeting?
Oh, good question.
Wow. Well, that's so my time, because Bateson. So first of all, Gregory Bateson was living up on this property where Bandler and Grinder were living, and this guy Robert Spitzer was sort of a wealthy person. But he'd founded this book company called Science and Behavior Books, and he published books by Virginia Satir, and then he published the first Structure of Magic books. But he had this property that he would let people stay on for very inexpensively on Alba Road, 1000 Alba Road.
And
And
woman, right?
yes, Ben Lomond, I know you were there. And
Not
and
on that property.
and so Bateson had a place that was literally kind of right across where, Bandler and Grinder were. They're like they're kind of very high-end cabins. They were not like cabins, but like today when people go glamping, they call it not glamorous camping. You've got
Yeah.
these what they tricked out cabin. Anyway, so Bateson lived there, and so they had this, which I think was very fortunate for them and for NLP, that to get that kind of influence. So it wasn't just an academic connection; it was you know, a co-living connection. Anyway, they were very, very much, what I say, supporting and um, encouraging us, to study with Bates. And I was interested in the kind of things he was doing anyway. So I walked into his ecology of mind class. So he had a class. It was a big class, beginning class. And again, there was hundreds of people in the class. And, for me, in a certain way, Richard, I am a visual person, but also I have a lot of very interesting, my auditory system is very sensitive to certain things. Like I was just saying to somebody, with these AI generated podcasts and things, it's really
Yeah,
hard for me to listen to them because they're clearly not coming from somebody's heart, you know.
Same with me.
I mean, and even if they're interesting or they're impressive, it's like, oh, that's impressive, but there's no spark. Now,
there's no heart.
yeah, whereas somebody like Bateson, when he spoke, it was like, for me, the way I used to characterize it, it's a little bit like the voice of God or something. First of all, he had this British accent, but, you know, it just that when when
Thank
he
God.
spoke,
Pretty sure God had a British accent.
when he spoke, it was like not you could as like not just coming from his head, it was just coming from he was like trying to speak from his soul. And for me, there's this, I don't see auras, some people see auras. I hear auras. It's like I used to like, if I listen to some of these, televangelists or certain politicians who will not be named, it's like I hear in their voice, like this is just, you know, excuse my term, but this is BS. Obviously this person is just spouting, like I can't relate to it. It doesn't go in anywhere. So, but Gregory had this, first of all, he had a tremendous sense of presence. He was a big guy. He was like 6'3". Um, and, he come and they just sort of and they'd speak, and you would feel like, wow, this is the wisdom of the ages coming through this person. And
Oh,
then,
yes.
and, and then of course, Richard, like speaking about variety, one moment he'd be talking about Balinese art, and then the next moment he'd be talking about steam engines, and the next moment he'd be talking about Beatles' legs, and the next moment he'd be, I mean, just
Marxism. Yeah, it's
so the content was all over the place, and yet, and and he never actually. I mean, people used to say, well, I know he's getting at something. Why doesn't he just come out and say it? But partially because I think if he came out and said it, it would take away from it, right? You wouldn't have gotten it. So
Exactly.
he was a very much of, I would call it, an inductive teacher, right?
Mhm.
Meaning rather than say, here's the principle and let's now unpack it, he would give all these different examples.
Right,
And
right, right.
my experience in that class, Oksana, was I'd be sitting there listening, and just like it would be like thoughts and ideas would just start dropping into my mind, like just dropping from this field into me. And I think that was one of the great things about his style, right? Is that he's not giving you he's not giving you the answer. He's creating this field, but then things start popping up, right? And it literally was like that for me. I would be sitting in this class, and like I say, ideas would just start falling in. I don't know how else to describe it. They would be start falling into me. Um, and so and I obviously was extremely influenced by his whole notion of the levels of learning, which was the obvious inspiration for the pyramid. But I was probably naming the things that Bateson would say he wouldn't actually come out and name it, but he would give examples, and you'd go, wow, this is so fundamental, this is so deep, um, and so that really touched me in many ways. It's kind of like if I think of somebody like Erickson and Bateson, they were colleagues, they were of this similar age. Um, but it's sort of like Bateson was kind of more of a spiritual guide for me, and Erickson was more of a no a um, more on this level of I don't know what to say, it's identity or something of what's possible in an identity. So they had really different focuses. And Gregory the way he used to describe it is that you were talking, Oksana, about this sort of that sort of witnessing. I think Gregory was the one that would, and he even talked about that he would like take something and look at it. And he said, Erickson would go in and start to, mess with it. He would just start going what he could do. So Erickson was sort of a doer, right? He would just start doing things. Bateson would kind of zoom out and look at things. So I don't know if that answers your question or
Just
brings up more questions.
it's answering really nicely because I kind of go with you to this class and sit with you and studying.
No,
So
I wish I'd been able to meet either Bateson or Erickson. They both died in 1980, and that's just
Yeah.
when I was awakening. I
that very
just a little bit, yeah, just a little bit late.
Yeah, that was a tough year. You know who else died that year, or at least very close, was Moshe Feldenkrais, who was
Oh,
also a very interesting and important influence in those early days. I read he's in my current Strategies of Genius Volume 4 book, and we used to say he was the Erickson of the body. So that, because Feldenkrais could do all these, sort of magical things for people physically.
did you have a chance to meet him
Yeah,
and
yes. So all the ones in Volume 4 are the ones who I met. And
I'm kind of studying Feldenkrais now? She's made her own kind
are
of
you? Are you?
yeah,
yeah.
I'm so happy. I kind of went to the direction where this Bateson, Erickson, Feldenkrais were available in this nearby NLP knowledge, because I
Yeah.
started with Richard, and immediately first months I got the direction, what should I start to read, because
Yes.
it's a enormous amount of information right now,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
have to really know. If you start to yourself just to study this, you can spend whole your life just to find the direction.
Exactly. But I think,
So
yeah.
mhm.
Well, just
What was
that.
it like?
What?
Yeah. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
I just really interested
Yeah,
in Feldenkrais. I know a lot more about Bateson and Erickson than I do about Feldenkrais, honestly.
Well, Feldenkrais had an interesting um, history. He was a physicist, uh, so studied physics, and in fact, I, he was the one who, and uh, Giulio Curie, who was Madame Curie's son-in-law, and they were developing the things with radioactive, radiation, and Feldenkrais was actually the one that took, when the Nazis occupied France and Paris, Feldenkrais took the information, all of the Giulio Curie's information, and personally delivered it to Churchill, to Winston Churchill. And I mean, so this guy was, so he had to get it out, outside of occupied France, get to England, and he's like to say one of the things that was one of his claims to fame was being able to turn a Churchill's head, because one of the things, we were talking about calibrating people, and one of the things what he learned a lot about somebody is that just by turning their head, he could, it's like kind of like that's the hologram for everything else. And then, he went to Palestine when it was, the United Nations made it in the Israeli state, and because they were not allowed to have weapons and things, he developed a whole martial art, on his own, how to help people defend themselves. And he's apparently the only Westerner to ever actually have a move incorporated into, the ancient martial art of judo. So, I
It's
mean,
traditional law. Yeah.
and 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 uh, and so he went to Japan and had connections there. But then I think what happened is he somehow he got injured, and then he started, not necessarily from martial arts, but for something else. And, he injured his knee or something, and then he turned his attention to healing, and that's how he developed what is today the Feldenkrais method, which was okay. So he took all of his knowledge of like martial arts, physics, etc., into the body and how to work with the body, and really again seeing it as a system, that if you that there's an old song about, the head bone's connected to the neck bone, the neck, but your elbow is going to influence what's happening in these other places, and he really had that capacity. Now,
What was he like? I mean, when just when you're with him.
he was somebody who was, again, he was that kind of person that you find this, I could think, with every single one of people that's in my volume 4 for sure. Type of person that when you're with them, first of all, they have a strong presence, right? They are present and they have a strong presence. But secondly, then when they turn their attention to you, you feel like you're the only one in the room, right? It's there, and there's a curiosity, right? So if Feldenkrais would start looking at you, you would start to feel like and he would be totally curious about you, and he would be seeing all these things in you that you don't know, right? Because you're not, we don't make those associations. And then especially if he, would touch you, so because he had two aspects of his work. One was called awareness through movement, which means that would be instructions for you to move. Like, for example, turn your head. How far can you turn your head until you think I can't turn it any farther? And then he would
Mhm.
start showing you, all right, well now, relax your shoulder blades. You relax your shoulder blades, and suddenly you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm stopping because my head actually is connected to other things, and I could turn it almost completely around if I just so which is again a really powerful thing, right? Because and the idea is that you're suddenly awakened, right? You suddenly are aware, oh, it's a little bit like the Bateson approach, right? You're suddenly aware, oh, I learned it for myself now that I was stopping myself because of my own assumption about, you know, like I can't do this, I'll break my neck. Well, wait a minute, if you relax this, oh yeah, I guess that's connected to my neck too. But then the other part of what he did was called functional integration. And functional integration was where the practitioner touches you and moves things for you. And it's usually very gentle. It's not like chiropractic. And so again, when Feldenkrais would touch you, it's kind of like you felt your body was suddenly extending, because when he touched you, it became part of your body. So it was, again,
It sounds kind of like Erickson in a way. That's
well,
the same.
that's what I said, like I said, the Erickson of the body.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
and also was very Ericksonian in the sense that he never saw the quote symptom as the problem. It's always something that he would work with. And
Uh,
oftentimes he would even take the place of the symptom, right? So in other words, if somebody is like favoring their arm, he might hold the arm so they don't have to, right? So he's actually taking the place of the symptom, and suddenly something else comes into awareness. Uh,
uh,
so, but again, and now the other person here that in my volume 4, which I mean, should bring in, she wasn't exactly a contemporary of those three. However, Gabrielle Roth was she one of our common connections was with Bateson. Bateson is the one that set her on her path.
didn't know
She,
that.
she-
Wow.
they were both at Esalen in the late 70s, and she was teaching dance and kind of developing her things. And Bateson would come and dance with her while he still could. And
Wow.
And he told her, he said to Gabrielle Roth, he said, Gabrielle, you're obsessed with the pattern that connects, which actually brings us all the way back to where we started, right? The pattern
Interesting.
that connects, which is regardless of the contents, right? Oksana, you were talking about all these different approaches, and what's the pattern that connects? And I think that's the search for this deeper structure. And when you find that pattern that connects, then then all of those things are not a bunch of separate things that are chaotic and confusing. Suddenly, I mean, this is also goes to like what's called chaos theory, right? It looks like chaos here, but out here, when you know these deeper principles, it all makes sense, right? It all fits. And so, Gregory was also a big mentor for her, and so there's connections there.
When is the book coming out? Do you have any prediction?
When I'm done with it. No, I'm hoping. I am hoping. I have a lot of things, Richard. I'm kind of using the anniversary event, the NLP 50th anniversary events in August in Santa Cruz as my my sort of informal. I don't want to say deadline because I don't like the word dead, but the completion point for a bunch of projects. So I'm hoping to have time. I mean,
Mm.
I have a lot of material, but I need to get everything, organized.
And by the way, when did your summer whatever your summer school at Santa Cruz UCSC begin? What was the first year?
Well, the first year we ever started, doing things up there I believe, was 1980. We started,
Oh, okay.
that was with the Bandler and Grinder. Then, they split up in
Yeah.
around 81. And Todd Epstein and I started what we call the Dynamic Learning Center in 1983. And then as you know, John Grinder and Judy were doing programs up there, and we started, because Todd and I were first doing things at the local hotels, and we realized we could do things at UCSC during the summer. And we had both been involved in those earlier ones. So I think it was probably around 1986, 87.
That makes sense because on the website it says 1991 it began, but
Well, 1991 is when NLP University began. So
okay.
so we had this dynamic learning center where in the beginning, because we didn't want to get into competition with Bandler and Grinder doing like NLP practitioner, mass practitioner, we would do things relating to specific topics like education. That's why we called ourselves Dynamic Learning Center, but also then health and leadership and other things. We started getting a lot of requests from people to do practitioner. So then we started doing, we didn't start doing practitioner. The very first program we ever did that was an NLP certification was a trainer training because there was not a lot of other trainer trainings. And so I think we started that in 86, 87. And then we, we was getting more and more interest in these different things. So then we decided the NLP University was to do all of the levels, practitioner, mass practitioner, trainer. And we started that in 1991.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time and interest in it's not answers, interesting conversation.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for your participation and also interesting topics and questions to Robert.
Yes. Well, I like it that, these are obviously, as you say, Oksana, they're conversations. They're not scripted, and it allows us to kind of explore different places that I think are really useful and would not come out if it was, which is a little bit like where we started about if your filters are too tight. So we are demonstrating the law of requisite variety in these conversations.
How things are popping out, and
Yeah.
and the conversation becoming the pattern which is connect.
Yes, yes. Well said, Oksana. I think that is the way to summarize this, is that the conversation is the pattern which connects. And
I found when I in 1992, after I knew I was going to stay in Russia, and I had come just with a suitcase of books, and that was before the era of personal computers. Then
right.
I've always had a library, and I decided to go back to Santa Cruz, and on KUSP advertised for books to take to Siberia, and we collected 18 tons of books, but I had no money at all, and I was working, I was cleaning offices at night to get money to put gas in the truck to collect the books, but they're all free. We got 18 tons and couldn't get them back, just couldn't. And then one of my acquaintances lived in Washington State. He said, "Take a break." I was getting frazzled, and he said, "Take a break." His mom was the secretary of the Tacoma, Washington, Vladivostok Sister City Committee, and she had the mayor of Vladivostok to ship all the books on an icebreaker to Vladivostok and return. So I gave them 8 tons, but naturally I kept the 10 tons that were the best, and I took those to Novosibirsk, and I discovered, I collected a lot of the Coevolution Quarterly, just to bring the rest.
Yes.
And I found a metaphor by Bateson that I've never seen published. It was called The Lady and the Engineer. It's about science and religion.
Wow.
And I'll send it to you. Just
wow, Robert doesn't have it.
I've never seen it published.
It doesn't sound familiar to me, and I've been going over a lot of these. There's one I'm publishing a couple of my favorite metaphors of his in the book too. But by the way, first of all, that gives me shivers. Just what you were saying, it's just
wow.
Yeah, wow.
And then Richard translated with Abramovich Fet, Russian professor of math and dissident. He translated Mind and Nature, to Russian, and
Wow.
it's just
We worked
such
on
a
it for 7
beautiful
years.
scientific translation with
Wow.
beautiful Russian language. So
Wow.
we have available, at least for Russian speakers, really good translation of Bateson. So we are all very much
Fantastic.
looking forward to this, to your first
Yes.
volume of Strategies of Genius, and to the next weekend, and to the
Yes.
next interview.
And yes, I have been actually I'm mapping out Pyramid 2. I'm almost ready. I'll get you because I know we have to get things translated, so I'll be getting you that material very soon. Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting and exciting,
Mhm.
just like everything we do.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's mutual.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
it,
Uh, yeah.
Okay, guys.
thanks.
Okay. So,
See you soon.
see you
Thanks for being with us, guys.
soon. See you. I'm glad we had to say. See you in a couple of days. Yeah. Deborah's out with Susie Smith finishing it's the third day of the health coach program. So I will pass on her greetings.
Lots of love.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Robert.
See you in a couple of days.
See you in a couple of days.
Bye.